Hello, puppies and kittens. Howdy from Texas. I've always liked science, but in my youth, I also believed a lot of New Age spiritualism and pseudoscientific woo that I thought at the time to be scientifically supported. I used to believe a lot of embarrassing things that I don't anymore, and it took me a while to learn proper skepticism, where you don't believe everything that you read, but you don't necessarily question all of reality either. That you know where to draw the line, and it's a wide gray area where maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. But I'm not going to believe anything without sufficient reason, good reasons that are evidently or rationally compelling. I've changed my mind about a lot of the things that I used to believe in once upon a time, and I hope that I will always be able to recognize when I'm wrong and change my mind accordingly, because I wouldn't be wrong anymore, right? The worst mindset I can think of is when you decide that you're going to believe something no matter what, and that you're going to be firm in your convictions so that no one can ever change your mind, and if you're wrong. I was duped by religious nonsense and pseudoscientific documentaries when the History Channel runs a show on ancient aliens. I believed that sort of crap when I was a kid. And not only is that same sort of thing still going on, but you've got it even worse now. Because back in my day, some journalists were still trying to maintain a veneer of integrity, of being objective and unbiased, to inform with just the facts. But on some networks, what counts for news now, particularly political news, is not even information anymore. It's just propaganda, designed to control how you feel, to make you afraid, to make you hate who you're supposed to hate. So they don't want you to know anything that might inform or allow a different opinion. I've watched politics with growing dismay as the truth doesn't seem to matter anymore. I hope that my friends and family who have been taken in by some egregious political falsehoods can change their minds given good reason. So I started this series to speak out and challenge bullshit in manipulative media and politics. You may have heard that a week or two ago, we here in Texas got some snow. And when I say that, I mean that we hit the lowest temperatures I've ever seen in 30 years or so that I've lived in Dallas. I've been to other states where they have a real winter. I mean, my daughter was born in Des Moines, Iowa, where the high temperature never got above freezing for 3 months. But Dallas is 700 miles south of Des Moines. And when they're 15 degrees below zero, we're at 65 and basking in the sun, like we were today. It gets really hot down south in the summer, and we have everything air conditioned, and our grid is prepared for that. But we rarely ever get very cold. I mean, in any given year, we'll have a week where we get down to 20 degrees or so, and we'll be back up into the 70s by the next week. And once we got as low as 18 degrees, but never lower than that until this year, last week, when we got down to 4. I want to stop using Fahrenheit. I'm tired of translating for the wider international audience, and I'm embarrassed that my country is the only first world nation still using this silly system. But I'm trying to communicate with other Americans too, so I have to. We got as cold as we've ever been, and then we had 2 snowstorms back to back, which also has never happened the whole time I've lived here. Once every few years, we'll get a bit of snow, just enough to paint everything white, and it's usually gone again by noon. It's rarely still here the next day or for the next snowstorm to add on to, so this was unprecedented, at least in my experience. Seems these conditions only happen once or twice in a century, and this was the year. Extreme weather conditions may be more common now because of climate change, but this storm shows us that we're not prepared to meet any new challenges. Our electrical grid managers were caught flat-footed, and millions of homes, including mine, went without power during freezing weather conditions. It's already a joke that, Texans don't know how to drive with ice on the road. I mean, in this storm, we had lots of crashes, but we had one that piled up 133 cars in one place on the freeway. And here we are with 4 inches of snow and facing single-digit temperatures, and the power goes out, and the heat along with it. We have a gas heater, but it still needs electricity to work. We were warned that there might be rolling blackouts where the electric company would have to shut off the power to some neighborhoods for 3 or 4 hours, and then the power would come back on as some other neighborhood would go dark for, their turn for a few hours. I've seen that sort of thing before. I was in South Africa last year where the power grid is so bad that they've had to do rolling blackouts every day for 14 years. There's no excuse for that. So I'm walking the streets of Johannesburg like a tourist, and then the power suddenly goes out. And there I am in a dodgy neighborhood in the dark, where every front yard of every house is surrounded by bars and barbed wire or cyclone fencing, because everybody's afraid of everybody else. We don't need to live like that. But what we had were not rolling blackouts where everyone takes 3 or 4 hour turn. We were off for 9 hours the first day and 21 hours the next day. We know of other people in our area who had been out for days at a time, and a few others reportedly might not have lost their power at all, because it wasn't rolling blackouts like they said. It was a catastrophic statewide failure wherein even hospitals and water treatment centers lost power, so that when the power came back on, you better not drink the water. No wonder our Republican Senator Ted Cruz fled to Mexico. That didn't bother me as much as the fact that he lied about it over and over again. He threw his kids under the bus. He threw his wife under the bus. He was pretending that he was just escorting his daughters to the border when his wife was already there to do that. And he had already invited a college roommate down from Florida to go with him. And his original itinerary would have kept him there for a few days. Yet he pretended that all he was ever going to do was fly down there and turn around and fly right back, like it's going to be the same day round trip. Why do we tolerate liars in government? I mean, how many times has this guy lied? It shouldn't be that they rack up 30,573 lies while in public office and still be expected to run again. It should be that very first bald-faced lie with deceptive intent should disqualify you for life, or at least until such time as you can show remorse, apologize, take responsibility, and fix the problem. Texas didn't want to do that. Every other state in the union is part of a collective federal power grid, either the western or eastern interconnection. And when a generating station in any area goes down, they can route power from one of the others to the surrounding network so that no one should have to freeze at all. That's if they're all up to code, so that any one station is designed to route power to another station that might happen to go down. But some people, especially in Texas, don't like the idea of everyone helping everyone for mutual benefit. They call that socialism, which is bad if you're into runaway capitalism. So Texas is the only state with its own independent power grid, not connected to either of the federal interconnects, because Texas didn't want to live up to federal regulations because of that libertarian attitude that they don't want to obey laws, and they don't want to be forced to do any more than the bare minimum they absolutely have to do, not when that would cut into what they can pocket. So when our state was advised several years ago that they had better winterize our network, like interconnected states already have, our all-Republican Electric Reliability Council opted not to do that. But first they lied and said they did. Days before the storm, they reported that they were ready for everything. Then, when everything fell down, they admitted that they hadn't actually prepared for anything. And the excuse they gave was that they refused to winterize the system because they lacked financial incentive. So they're not going to prepare for the system for an unusual but inevitable eventuality because they've deregulated and they don't have to. And they're not going to do it for practical reasons either, not when they can rake in financial benefits instead of investing back into the system over which they preside. The one Texas mayor shifted the blame to Texans themselves and ranted on Facebook that the government doesn't owe us anything, and he shamed us for looking for a handout. But I pay my electric bill and my property taxes. I have for years. My electricity is not given to me. And what's more, I can't go out and winterize the power grid all by myself, nor with my neighbor's help either, because that takes more money and manpower than any of us have as individuals. That is exactly why government is necessary to tackle jobs in a large community that we can't do individually. We don't need irresponsible do-nothings like that mayor to blame us for their failures and then resign in a huff like he did. I don't pay taxes for the leaders here to draw a salary just to own the libtards on Twitter and gesture meaninglessly at the sky as if God's going to come down and fix everyone's electricity, because that's worked so well so far. The failure of the Texas grid is Exhibit A, why unregulated capitalism doesn't work. But some people are still deluding themselves that millions of people in the state can maintain a ginormous electrical grid or any function of mammoth infrastructure without any adequate government oversight at all, not even from the state level, which is what happened here. And let's think about that for a minute. I picture Texas power companies working rogue. The luckier cities and towns won't be chiseled because the biggest bully has control of the power supply, and the others get to try to escape their fiefdom, like if they're living in a Mad Max dystopia, if they can. During our recent winter storm, our former Governor Rick Perry reportedly told House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy that Texans would willingly go without heat or electricity for days rather than let the federal government have any more power. But no one, not even Rick Perry, is willing to freeze to death, to sacrifice themselves in defense of the profit margin of corrupt tycoons who will not live up to their responsibility. Millions of Texans did go without power for days, and at least 86 people died in this freeze. To say nothing of all the other connected tragedies because of decades of neglect and incompetent political management. And if that isn't enough, it gets even worse, because the entire system is run by Republicans who are effectively owned by and beholden to their billionaire donors in the fossil fuel industry. Everyone on the Electric Reliability Council of Texas was appointed by our current Republican governor, Greg Abbott. Abbott was on Fox News blaming the power failure on green energy. He said that the problem was that our wind and solar got shut down, and that accounts for 10% of our total power, leaving us with just enough light to light our city skylines, but not enough to heat freezing homes, so that people had to sit in their cars to get warm. And it still gets even worse than that, because some people have donned their tinfoil hats, insisting that despite our millions of collective experiences, that the Texas snowpocalypse is a conspiracy of manufactured fake snow by Bill Gates using a chemical invention of some mystical snow that doesn't burn or melt. As if millions of people, including myself, didn't watch the snow come down, and we watched it melt too. How stupid have we become that people can spread a conspiracy like this and others are dumb enough to believe it? I mean, Bill Gates is apparently a busy man, what with putting microchips in vaccines to track all of us, when he could have done that much more easily just with our cell phones. But hey, they also claim for no reason that you shouldn't use 5G because of psychic transmissions or some such shit. Because folks, if anything happens that makes their beloved party or politicians look bad, then to them it didn't really happen. If you make believe hard enough, then me and my family didn't just freeze our asses off for days and wander a wasteland of darkened city streets in my Jeep. And back to reality. I know a lot of people lost tropical fish and other pets in this storm. I had to hold my wife's bearded dragon bundled under thick blankets with me for a few hours before I could be sure that it was still alive. We finally rented the last vacant hotel room that still had electricity and took my parrot and her lizard there to stay warm. Had no estimate on how long the blackout would last. They told us it would only be a few hours. They lied. Texas Governor Greg Abbott used this opportunity to platform propaganda, blaming Democrats, even though the governor, the lieutenant governor, the state house and Senate, and all of ERCOT are all Republicans. There were no Democrats anywhere involved. Abbott blamed his failure on the Green New Deal, which Texas never adopted. No one has yet, and so that doesn't have anything to do with it either. But when we have a demon of green energy because we've got to promote fossil fuels one way or another. Now, while it is true that some wind turbines in Texas did freeze and stop working, we should remember that Iowa uses wind turbines too, only theirs did not freeze because they were winterized. They were prepared for this. And what else our governor deliberately did not say was that the majority of Texas's power, 50 to 70%, comes from burning natural gas, a fossil fuel, and that the cold had shut that system down too by freezing gauges and such, so that everything, whether clean or dirty, was all inoperable. While he was on Fox News praising fossil fuels for having saved the day when renewable energy failed, he was lying. The whole system failed. And that was entirely the fault of Republicans and not any Democrat. I have a lot of good reasons not to like Governor Greg Abbott, and I don't, but I'm still going to give credit where it's due. After ERCOT failed the state, and several members immediately resigned and may be facing criminal charges at this point, Abbott got on TV again, and this time admitted not that he lied, which he should have fessed up to, but he said that the entire system had collapsed, not just green energy, like he had implied before. He said that there would be investigations and that people would be held accountable, and not just for the failure of the grid, but also investigations into enormous price hikes from utility companies that were suddenly charging their customers thousands of dollars over normal. One guy was charged $16,000 for his monthly electric bill that was automatically deducted from his account. Abbott assured us there would be preparations and significant reforms, ensuring that no such failure would ever happen again, and that ERCOT would be completely reformed from the ground up. And he would be working with legislatures, state and federal, to take care of this so that we would never have this problem again. And the reason I said I would give him credit for this is because he could have just kept on lying and projecting blame like our senators do, like our Republican former president does to this day, but he didn't. Instead, Abbott did, at least appeared, to do something that Republicans rarely ever do, that our last Republican president couldn't do. It seems to me that Abbott has at least accepted responsibility.